He finally spoke. After years of silence, after decades of whispers, after headlines spinning rumors faster than the world could keep up, Prince Harry has finally broken that silence. But what did he say? What did he reveal about Meghan Markle, the woman he once vowed to stand beside through every storm? And why did he keep quiet for so long? These are the questions the world has been dying to have answered. And today, for the first time, we're going to dive deep into Harry's own words, his private reflections, and the moments that no one has ever seen before. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Imagine carrying a secret so heavy, so personal, that it shapes every decision you make, yet you can't speak about it. That's been Harry's life for the past decade. Behind the carefully curated public appearances, behind the staged smiles, behind the perfect royal wave, there was tension, confusion, and a struggle no one could see. The cameras captured the glittering events, the glamorous outfits, the fairy tale moments, but the story behind the story, the private battles, the intimate doubts, those remained hidden. Until now, Harry admits that some of their biggest life-altering decisions, leaving the UK, stepping back from royal duties, cutting ties with family traditions, even the high-profile media deals, happened faster than he was personally comfortable with. He says he kept quiet too long, that he allowed events to unfold without fully processing what was happening, and that in hindsight, some of the choices may have been more reactive than reflective. But what does that mean exactly? Was he pressured? Was he manipulated? Or was it a matter of love and loyalty pushing him forward faster than his own instincts could keep pace? The story begins with the unbearable weight of silence. For years, Harry has been scrutinized for every choice he made. Some labeled him selfish, others brave. Some said he abandoned his duty. Others applauded his courage to carve his own path. But through all of this, there was a private narrative, a story of personal struggle and conflicting loyalties. And central to that narrative was Meghan. Harry speaks now, not to settle scores, but to finally offer his perspective. The truth as he experienced it, unfiltered, unedited, and raw. Let's rewind to the first time he realized that life as he knew it might never be the same again. The pressure of royal life is something most of us can't even imagine. From the moment you are born, every move is scrutinized, every word analyzed, every smile dissected. Harry learned early on how to navigate this world, how to anticipate the press, how to play the part expected of him. But when Meghan entered the picture, everything changed. Their whirlwind romance was electric, intense, and the kind of love story people dream about. But alongside that passion came complications, family dynamics, media scrutiny, and the constant friction of two very different worlds colliding. Harry describes it as standing at the edge of a precipice, with the winds of expectation pushing from all sides. The love he felt for Meghan was undeniable, yet he was caught in a storm of conflicting pressures. He felt the pull of duty to his family, the expectations of the monarchy, the gaze of the media, and the weight of his own conscience. Every decision was magnified, every hesitation questioned, every choice dissected in public forums. And then there were the private moments, the conversations that happened behind closed doors, the arguments and reassurances that never made it to the tabloids. These were the moments that shaped the decisions he would later describe as being too fast, too sudden, and sometimes too much. One of the most shocking revelations Harry shares is how some decisions, leaving the UK, the public stepping back, signing lucrative media contracts, were accelerated by factors he hadn't fully anticipated. Not that he wasn't willing. Harry wanted to protect his family, to create a life where he and Meghan could exist outside the intense glare of royal expectations. But he admits that there were times when he felt swept along, when his own voice, his own instincts, were drowned out by the momentum of events and the influence of those closest to him. It's a vulnerability that few have seen, a candidness rarely afforded to someone so deeply enmeshed in public life. Harry's admission raises a provocative question. How much influence can one partner have over another when the stakes are so high? And how much responsibility falls on Harry himself, as the decision-maker, as the prince, as the man caught between duty and desire? He doesn't answer this in simple terms, because the answer is messy, complicated, and deeply human. He paints a picture of a life lived at the intersection of personal loyalty, public scrutiny, and the intense pressures of a world that rarely allows room for mistakes. The emotions he conveys are raw and layered. There's pride for the choices he made and the courage to step away from traditions that no longer fit his life. There's regret for moments when silence seemed easier than confrontation, when hesitation led to consequences that could have been mitigated. There's love, unwavering, for Meghan, despite the complications, despite the misunderstandings, despite the public backlash. And woven through it all is a sense of relief. The relief of finally speaking, of finally telling the story on his terms. What makes Harry's narrative compelling is the combination of personal insight and universal relatability. While most of us will never live under the gaze of millions, the themes he explores, love, loyalty, pressure, doubt, and the courage to finally speak, resonate with anyone who has faced a moment when staying silent seemed easier than telling the truth. He reminds us that decisions, even those made with the best intentions, can have unforeseen consequences, and that the path to self-realization often comes with discomfort, fear, and the necessity of confronting difficult truths. As we dive deeper into Harry's revelations, there's a growing sense of anticipation. What exactly did Meghan do that prompted him to finally break his silence? How did their personal dynamics influence monumental decisions that altered the course of their lives? And what are the lessons Harry has learned about love, loyalty, and the courage to be heard that the world can take away from his experiences? These are the questions that will guide us through the chapters ahead. And yet, even as Harry speaks, there remains an air of mystery. He doesn't reveal everything at once. The story unfolds in layers, moments of tension, of tenderness, of conflict, and of revelation. We are invited to sit with him, to witness the emotional landscape of a man who has lived life under extraordinary scrutiny, and to understand the choices that shaped not only his life, but the public perception of a royal family in transition. The anticipation builds because every revelation hints at another, larger truth waiting just beneath the surface. So, as we begin this journey, ask yourself, what would you do if you were in Harry's shoes? If love, duty, and public expectation collided in ways that left you questioning your own instincts, how would you respond? And more importantly, what would it take for you to finally speak your truth after years of silence? These are not just questions for Harry. They are questions for all of us, and they set the stage for the dramatic and revealing story that is about to unfold. Did you ever wonder what it feels like to live a life where every word you speak, every step you take, every smile you give, is scrutinized by millions? For Prince Harry, that life has been his reality since birth. But there's one truth he's been carrying silently for years. A truth so heavy that it shaped the man he is today, even before he ever held Meghan's hand. And that truth, he kept it locked inside. For decades, he bore the burden of silence. From a young age, Harry learned quickly that the world demands perfection from those born into royal life. There's a script you follow, a choreography you memorize, and a mask you never remove. Smiles at public events, poised statements to the press, perfect photos for every occasion. But behind the polished exterior, Harry was just a boy, and later a man, wrestling with emotions, doubts, and an overwhelming sense of pressure. He was constantly aware that nothing he did could ever just be enough, not for the family, not for the institution, and certainly not for the public. Every misstep could be amplified, every hesitation criticized, every private thought misinterpreted. But there was one area where the silence cut deeper than the public ever imagined: his relationship with Meghan. Before she came into his life, Harry had felt the weight of expectation, the endless commentary, the unrelenting glare of the media. Yet, he never expected that love could introduce a new layer of complexity, one that challenged not just his public persona, but his inner truth. He found himself torn between his love for Meghan and the life he had known all his life, a life defined by duty, tradition, and a monarchy that demands loyalty above all else. Harry admits now that he kept quiet too long. He stayed silent even when he wanted to speak, even when he felt conflicted, even when he wanted to push back. Why? Because speaking out carried risks that could change not only his life, but the lives of everyone he loved. And in that silence, he felt the paradox of power and helplessness. He was a prince, admired, envied, and adored, yet powerless to voice his truth without triggering a cascade of consequences he could neither control nor anticipate. The burden of silence isn't just about withholding words. It's about carrying secrets that affect every decision you make. Harry recalls moments where the decisions he had to make seemed rushed, almost instinctive, without room for reflection. Leaving the UK, stepping back from royal duties, signing media deals, these weren't just choices on a timeline. They were seismic shifts in a life that had always been mapped by expectation. Yet, at every turn, Harry felt like he was acting in a world that didn't allow hesitation. It was as if the moment demanded action before he had fully processed what was happening. The weight of expectation pressed down, and his voice, the part of him that might have questioned, resisted, or paused, was drowned out by the momentum of circumstance. But this isn't a story about blame. It's about reality, human complexity, and the intricate interplay of love, loyalty, and personal agency. Harry reflects on his silence not to point fingers, but to understand his own journey. He acknowledges the contradictions. Moments when he felt empowered yet constrained, moments when love and fear collided, moments when loyalty conflicted with self-preservation. These contradictions define the burden he carried, and they help explain why he remained silent for so long. Imagine standing in a room where the walls are lined with mirrors, each reflecting a version of yourself that the world wants to see. Each reflection is scrutinized, judged, and compared. Now imagine adding the weight of intimate decisions, private betrayals, and personal doubts. That is the reality Harry faced every day, long before he stepped onto the global stage with Meghan by his side. And in those moments of private reflection, Harry realized something critical. Silence can be both a shield and a prison. It protects you from immediate harm, but slowly corrodes your ability to act freely. He had been protecting himself, yes, but also protecting others. And in doing so, he lost part of his own voice. As the relationship with Meghan deepened, the stakes grew higher. Harry found himself making choices that affected not just him, but his family, the monarchy, and the public narrative. The love he felt was genuine, profound, and transformative, yet intertwined with a pressure cooker of external forces. Every step they took together seemed monumental. Every decision required negotiation, compromise, and sometimes rapid execution. It's here, Harry reveals, that the burden of silence became almost unbearable. He couldn't fully explain his fears without exposing vulnerabilities to the public. He couldn't voice disagreements without risking scandal. And so, he held his tongue, swallowing doubts, questions, and frustrations, carrying them quietly as the world speculated about his every move. One of the most profound effects of this silence was its impact on Harry's mental health. He describes the feeling of being trapped in a cycle of unspoken truths, of wrestling with decisions made faster than he felt ready for, of navigating a public life that left no space for private contemplation. Therapy sessions, confidential conversations with close friends, and moments of introspection became lifelines, places where he could speak without fear of judgment. Yet even these small spaces were temporary sanctuaries in a life dominated by external pressures. And there was a deeper, emotional dimension to the silence. Harry cared deeply about Meghan, and part of keeping quiet was about protecting her, shielding her from scrutiny, and maintaining the privacy of their relationship. But that protective instinct came at a cost: his own clarity, his own agency, and, at times, his own sense of self. He reflects now on moments when he might have said more, acted differently, or asserted his perspective with greater firmness. Yet, at the time, the fear of unintended consequences, for Meghan, for his family, for the monarchy, outweighed the impulse to speak. What makes this burden of silence so compelling is the tension between intention and consequence. Harry's silence was both an act of care and a source of inner conflict. It allowed him to navigate immediate crises, but it also intensified the pressure and complicated future choices. Every decision, every word withheld, every private thought suppressed, became a thread in a larger tapestry of consequences that would eventually culminate in the dramatic revelations we are witnessing today. Harry also reflects on the irony of public perception. To the outside world, he appeared decisive, sometimes even fearless. Headlines depicted him as rebellious, independent, and courageous. Yet, internally, he often felt the opposite. Hesitant, constrained, and deeply aware of the consequences of every action. This contrast between public image and private reality fueled a growing awareness. The longer he remained silent, the more distorted the narrative became. And in that distortion lay both danger and opportunity. Danger in the form of misunderstandings, misrepresentations, and personal anguish. Opportunity in the chance to finally reclaim his voice and tell the story from his perspective. The burden of silence also illuminates the complexity of love in the spotlight. Harry loved Meghan deeply, yet that love existed alongside the pressures of an institution, the scrutiny of a global audience, and the expectations of family. Decisions that might have been straightforward in another context became layered, complicated, and accelerated. The push and pull of loyalty, trust, fear, and desire created a dynamic that was both exhilarating and exhausting. And in the midst of this emotional whirlwind, Harry learned that silence can feel safer than confrontation, until the consequences of not speaking become impossible to ignore. Every choice he made in those years, from leaving the UK to stepping back from royal duties, was informed not only by love and loyalty, but also by this weight of silence. The decisions happened rapidly, sometimes before he fully processed them. Some he embraced with conviction. Others he followed reluctantly, swept along by circumstance, momentum, and the subtle influence of those closest to him. It is within this interplay of decision and restraint that the story of his silence truly comes to life. And yet, despite the complexity, the contradictions, and the emotional turbulence, Harry's story is ultimately about courage. The courage to reflect, to confront the consequences of silence, and, finally, to speak. Because speaking, after all, is never just about the words. It's about reclaiming agency, telling your truth, and breaking free from the invisible chains that have constrained you for years. Some decisions change your life in an instant. Others sneak up on you, unfold slowly, and reveal their consequences only years later. For Prince Harry, the hardest choices were both sudden, irreversible, and fueled by forces he hadn't fully prepared for. Did he leave the UK too fast? Did he sign media deals before he truly understood the weight of his decisions? Could he have paused, reflected, or done things differently? Or was the pace inevitable, driven by love, loyalty, and the inexorable pressure of circumstance? Harry admits now that some of their biggest decisions, leaving the UK, stepping back from royal duties, signing major media deals, happened faster than he was personally ready for. It wasn't because he lacked courage. He wanted a life where he and Meghan could live safely, freely, and on their own terms. But in hindsight, he recognizes the tension between action and understanding. Some choices felt like they were propelled forward by external momentum. The media, family expectations, public perception, and Meghan's own determination. And while he trusted his instincts, he also felt the subtle pressure of needing to act quickly, to protect, to preserve, to move before circumstances left them trapped. Think about the decision to step back from royal life. On the surface, it might look simple. Announce your intention, negotiate the terms, leave for a quieter life abroad. But for Harry, it was far more complicated. There were protocols, traditions, expectations, and an entire institution relying on stability. The moment they decided to step back, everything accelerated. Conversations that might have taken months compressed into weeks. Approvals, arguments, and compromises collided, leaving little room for personal reflection. Harry describes feeling like he was caught on a fast-moving train, unable to step off until it reached its next station, a station that, in many ways, he hadn't chosen but had no option to avoid. The media deals, too, were a whirlwind. Harry and Meghan sought financial independence, a way to support their family without relying solely on royal funds. The world watched as Netflix deals, Spotify contracts, and other lucrative agreements were signed. But behind the headlines, Harry recalls intense negotiations, sleepless nights, and moments of doubt. Some of the deals moved faster than he expected. The allure of independence was undeniable, but so too was the pressure to act swiftly, to seize opportunities before the window closed. He wondered if waiting a bit longer, reflecting more carefully, or approaching differently might have altered the trajectory. Yet at the time, hesitation felt like risk, and risk was something he couldn't afford. And then there was the personal dimension. Decisions that seemed practical or strategic in the public eye carried profound emotional consequences behind closed doors. Moving abroad wasn't just a logistical choice. It was a rupture from family, culture, and tradition. Every call with relatives, every family gathering missed, every birthday celebrated from a distance deepened the tension. Harry describes the experience as a series of compromises, where love for Meghan and commitment to family pulled in opposite directions. He made choices in moments of clarity, but also in moments of urgency, when delay would have created chaos or increased exposure to scrutiny. What makes these decisions even more complex is the role of timing. Life seemed to accelerate around them. Events spiraled faster than Harry could process. Media speculation, family pressures, Meghan's own ambitions, and the constant global attention. Decisions that might normally have taken months of careful deliberation occurred in days or even hours. And in that compressed timeline, Harry often felt unmoored, like a captain navigating a storm with incomplete charts. He trusted Meghan, trusted his instincts, and trusted the people around him. But the pace sometimes left him questioning. Were they moving too fast? Could he have slowed things down? Would doing so have prevented some of the fallout they experienced later? Harry also reflects candidly on the emotional impact of this rapid pace. Acting quickly brought relief, momentum, and a sense of control. But it also produced anxiety, second-guessing, and moments of fear that decisions were being made without full consideration of consequences. There were nights he lay awake wondering if he had rushed too far, too fast, or if the world was ready to accept the choices he and Meghan had made. He admits to experiencing guilt over leaving family behind, guilt over exposing Meghan to unprecedented scrutiny, and guilt over decisions he didn't feel entirely prepared to make. And yet, there were also moments of exhilaration. The speed of change sometimes brought clarity. Moving forward quickly forced him to confront fears, to make choices based on principles rather than hesitation. In those moments, he realized that life doesn't always wait for comfort. Sometimes, the right path is the one that demands immediate action, even if it terrifies you. And in the end, some of these rapid decisions, stepping back, signing deals, relocating, opened doors that Harry couldn't have imagined if he had lingered in indecision. Still, the contradictions remained. He loved Meghan, yet he sometimes feared the consequences of their decisions. He wanted independence, yet he worried about leaving family traditions behind. He sought freedom, yet moving so quickly made him feel unprepared. These tensions created emotional spikes, moments of doubt, regret, excitement, and triumph intertwined in a way few outsiders could understand. The public saw the headlines, the polished statements, the confident smiles. They didn't see the internal debates, the sleepless nights, the whispers of what if that haunted him in private. Harry's honesty about these decisions provides a window into a broader lesson. Life often forces action faster than we're prepared for, and love and loyalty can accelerate choices beyond our comfort zone. He reminds us that no decision exists in isolation. Every choice ripples outward, affecting relationships, public perception, and personal well-being. And when those decisions happen in the glare of public attention, the stakes become enormous. The weight of consequences, combined with the need for swift action, produces a pressure few could withstand without question. The audience might wonder, was Meghan pushing these decisions? Or was it the natural momentum of their lives converging in an extraordinary way? Harry's account is nuanced. He describes Meghan as determined, insightful, and committed to their shared future. Her vision for their lives was bold, sometimes faster than he personally anticipated, yet always grounded in a desire for security, freedom, and family stability. Their relationship created both a driving force and a crucible, a combination of inspiration and urgency that shaped every major choice. And Harry, navigating this dynamic, often found himself moving at a pace that left him both exhilarated and unsettled. The emotional dimension of rapid decisions also ties directly into Harry's reflections on silence. Because so many choices happened quickly, he often felt he couldn't fully explain his reasoning to others, family, friends, or the public, without revealing vulnerabilities or inviting judgment. The pace amplified the weight of silence. Decisions moved forward, and he had to carry the consequences alone until he finally found the courage to speak. This intersection of speed, pressure, and private reflection underscores the complexity of his experience. The faster life moved, the heavier the burden of unspoken truths became. And yet, there was clarity in the chaos. Moving fast forced him to confront fears, test his instincts, and embrace responsibilities that might have been postponed indefinitely in a slower, more measured environment. The whirlwind of decisions shaped his resilience, sharpened his judgment, and clarified his priorities. Harry acknowledges the paradox. Acting too quickly sometimes created challenges, but it also catalyzed growth. The very urgency he initially feared became the vehicle for transformation. As we examine these rapid decisions, it's impossible to ignore the broader implications. Family relationships were strained, public perception was volatile, and media narratives intensified. Each choice, taken in haste or necessity, became a focal point for discussion, debate, and sometimes criticism. Yet Harry's narrative emphasizes that these choices were never reckless. They were deeply considered, emotionally charged, and grounded in a desire to create a life that balanced love, duty, and self-preservation. He shows that even in fast-moving circumstances, thoughtful intention can coexist with rapid action, though it rarely feels easy in the moment. This chapter of Harry's story also invites us to reflect on the universality of accelerated decisions. How often do we find ourselves forced into choices before we feel ready? How often do love, duty, and external pressures collide, creating moments that demand immediate action? Harry's experience magnifies these human realities, turning them into a high-stakes drama under the public gaze. But the underlying emotions are ones anyone can relate to: fear, doubt, courage, and the drive to protect what matters most. And yet, despite all the momentum, Harry knew there were consequences lurking just beyond the horizon. Decisions made in haste can create cracks that only appear later, tensions that rise unexpectedly, and emotional costs that surface in the quiet moments. For Harry, these consequences would manifest not only in his public image but also in the private realm: strained relationships, personal doubts, and the ongoing challenge of reconciling love and loyalty with responsibility and legacy. He was moving fast, yes, but he was also learning about himself, about Meghan, and about the life they were building together. As we move deeper into Harry's narrative, it becomes clear the whirlwind of decisions was more than circumstance. It was a crucible, testing character, relationships, and endurance. The speed of life demanded courage, resilience, and clarity. And through it all, Harry learned that the act of decision-making, even when rushed, is inseparable from the act of reflection. Every choice, every rapid movement, every leap forward contained within it a lesson about love, loyalty, and the limits of silence. But as Harry reveals, even with all the lessons learned, the fallout of these fast decisions was only beginning to surface. Consequences were waiting, tensions were simmering, and one revelation, the next one, would shake the foundation of everything he thought he understood. Money, power, influence, freedom. For most people, these concepts are abstract, aspirational, or even intimidating. But for Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, they became the very real instruments of change and the source of tension that no one outside their inner circle could fully understand. Signing major media deals wasn't just about wealth. It was about independence, security, and the ability to control their own narrative. Yet behind the glossy headlines and celebratory announcements, there were complexities, pressures, and emotional spikes that would test even the strongest relationships. When Harry first talks about the media deals, he doesn't start with contracts or sums of money. He starts with fear. The fear of stepping into a world where every move would be publicly dissected, where every interview, every streaming project, every podcast appearance could be twisted, misinterpreted, or weaponized. This fear was compounded by the speed of events. Deals were negotiated faster than he expected, deadlines compressed by external pressures, and opportunities that might have seemed tantalizing in private felt monumental in public. He recounts moments where he had to sign off on agreements that would alter their lives forever, sometimes before he had fully processed the implications. Imagine negotiating a contract worth millions while the world is watching, while your family is questioning your motives, and while your own instincts are screaming for caution. Harry admits he was anxious, conflicted, and aware that every decision carried consequences that extended far beyond the balance sheet. It wasn't just about financial independence. It was about reputation, legacy, and the message it would send to the monarchy, the media, and the public. Every clause, every term, every nuance mattered, because a misstep could be exploited, misrepresented, or misunderstood. And yet, the deals were irresistible. For Harry and Meghan, they represented freedom, the chance to step out from the shadows of tradition, to live on their own terms, and to create a sustainable life for their family. He recalls the exhilaration that accompanied the fear. The sense that they were finally taking control, finally telling their story on their terms, finally carving a path that was theirs alone. But this thrill was always tempered by anxiety. Could they trust the world to understand their motives? Could they navigate the optics without fueling criticism? Were they prepared for the inevitable backlash? Harry also speaks candidly about Meghan's role in the media negotiations. He describes her as determined, strategic, and visionary. She saw opportunities that Harry initially hesitated to embrace. She pushed him to act decisively, to leverage their platform, and to seize moments that could define their independence. But Harry admits that sometimes the pace was overwhelming. Some decisions, some contracts, some projects moved faster than he was ready for. He trusted her judgment, yet he struggled internally with the speed and scale of the changes. And therein lay a paradox. Love and partnership were catalysts, yet they also accelerated choices beyond his comfort zone. The emotional dimension of these deals cannot be overstated. Every negotiation, every public announcement, every project launch carried weight. There was excitement, yes, the thrill of creativity, the joy of storytelling, the anticipation of financial independence. But there was also tension. Worry about public perception, fear of family disapproval, and anxiety over the long-term impact on their lives. Harry describes feeling a constant push and pull, caught between the promise of empowerment and the fear of scrutiny. He had to navigate this emotional labyrinth while remaining steadfast, composed, and strategic. And the scrutiny came fast. Media coverage intensified, speculation ran rampant, and the narratives surrounding their deals became as significant as the deals themselves. Harry reflects on how misinformation and misinterpretation shaped public opinion. Every announcement was dissected, every quote analyzed, every perceived misstep magnified. In some ways, the media became both an ally and an adversary, a platform to tell their story, yet a lens that distorted it. He describes a moment when he realized that no matter how carefully they managed the deals, the narrative could be beyond their control. And that realization weighed heavily, compounding the already intense pressure. Yet Harry also acknowledges the necessity of these moves. The deals provided financial security, independence, and the ability to create a life outside the rigid constraints of tradition. They were steps toward autonomy, a chance to define identity, purpose, and impact on their own terms. He frames these agreements not merely as business transactions, but as acts of self-determination. In every contract, every meeting, every discussion, he saw the opportunity to shape a narrative that was authentic, meaningful, and empowering. And that vision, though daunting, kept them moving forward. The juxtaposition between opportunity and risk created constant tension. Harry recalls nights filled with second-guessing, wondering if the deals were the right move, worrying about how they would affect family dynamics, public perception, and personal well-being. There were moments when he questioned his own judgment, moments when he felt swept along by momentum, and moments when he doubted whether anyone could truly understand the pressures he faced. Yet despite the fear, the uncertainty, and the rapid pace, he continued, because the promise of freedom, stability, and self-expression outweighed the risks. And then there was the interplay with personal life. The media deals didn't exist in a vacuum. Every contract, every announcement, every project impacted their family, their relationships, and their daily existence. Decisions about finances were intertwined with decisions about location, safety, and public image. Harry describes the emotional labor involved in balancing professional obligations with family needs, the sleepless nights, the careful consideration of messaging, and the constant tension between ambition and protection. He reflects on the paradox that success brought both empowerment and vulnerability, opening doors while exposing new risks. Direct questions to the audience become unavoidable here. If you were in Harry's position, could you navigate such high-stakes decisions while maintaining personal integrity, protecting loved ones, and facing public scrutiny? Could you balance the promise of independence with the threat of misrepresentation? And how would you act when the world's gaze is fixed on your every move, interpreting intentions that are far more nuanced than they appear? Harry's reflections make these dilemmas tangible, relatable, and emotionally charged, reminding us that even the privileged face extraordinary pressures when decisions affect more than just themselves. In addition, Harry reveals that the speed of these deals sometimes forced compromises, both emotionally and strategically. There were moments when he wished for more time to consult, more space to reflect, and more opportunities to fully process the ramifications. Yet time was often a luxury they didn't have. Opportunities arose, pressures mounted, and momentum demanded action. The deals became milestones in a life moving faster than he could always comprehend. And through it all, he learned that courage is not the absence of doubt, but the willingness to act despite it. There were also surprising twists. Deals intended for independence sometimes drew more attention than expected, creating narratives they hadn't anticipated. Public perception swung wildly, from admiration to criticism, from curiosity to condemnation. Harry recounts moments when the media frenzy forced rapid adjustments, requiring nimble thinking, resilience, and a keen sense of timing. Every success carried scrutiny, and every opportunity carried consequences that had to be managed with care, foresight, and emotional intelligence. He learned, sometimes painfully, that every deal is more than a transaction. It is a story, a message, and a reflection of values, all under the microscope of a global audience. And amid all the financial strategy, the contracts, the media optics, and the public judgment, Harry never lost sight of his family. Every decision, every deal, every negotiation was ultimately about creating a life where he, Meghan, and their children could thrive. The emotional stakes, the personal stakes, and the public stakes were inseparable. He reflects on the constant tension between professional ambition and personal responsibility, the delicate balancing act required to honor both. And he acknowledges the contradictions inherent in this balance. The desire for freedom versus the fear of exposure, the pursuit of independence versus the responsibility to protect those he loves. But Harry also reveals a crucial insight. Even when decisions happen faster than we anticipate, even when the pressure feels unmanageable, clarity emerges through action. The media deals, for all their complexity, offered lessons in courage, negotiation, and resilience. They tested his ability to maintain integrity under scrutiny, to act decisively while navigating uncertainty, and to balance personal ambition with familial responsibility. And while the fallout from these decisions would ripple for years, Harry recognized that these were choices that defined the trajectory of their lives, choices that demanded courage, adaptability, and honesty. And yet, just when it seemed the media deals were the pinnacle of challenge, Harry hints at another revelation. One that shifted everything they thought they knew about independence, influence, and the true cost of freedom. A moment, an event, a disclosure that would challenge assumptions, provoke debate, and reshape narratives. And it was coming, faster than anyone could anticipate. What does it truly mean to leave home? Not just physically, not just geographically, but emotionally, culturally, and spiritually? For Prince Harry, leaving the UK wasn't a vacation, a temporary escape, or a simple relocation. It was a seismic rupture, a decision that reshaped identity, family bonds, and the very way the world perceived him. But why did he leave? And what did it cost him, personally and publicly, to step into a life beyond the rigid boundaries of the monarchy? Harry recalls the moment the idea first took hold. The realization that staying might mean suffocating under expectations he could neither escape nor negotiate. The palace walls weren't just physical structures. They were symbolic boundaries, the invisible lines of protocol, expectation, and tradition. Every movement, every decision, every word had to align with a centuries-old script. And while Harry respected the monarchy, he also knew he couldn't continue living under rules that stifled love, personal growth, and family freedom. Leaving the UK was, in many ways, an act of rebellion, but it wasn't impulsive. It was the culmination of years of observation, reflection, and personal struggle. Harry had watched family members navigate similar pressures, often at great personal cost. He had witnessed the media frenzy, the constant scrutiny, and the emotional toll exacted on those closest to him. And he had experienced firsthand the suffocating weight of public expectation. The decision to leave wasn't just about escaping criticism. It was about reclaiming agency, taking control of a life that had always felt mapped out by others. Yet leaving wasn't simple. Harry recounts the internal conflict, loyalty to family versus loyalty to love, tradition versus autonomy, duty versus desire. Every choice to stay or go carried emotional ramifications, and every conversation with Meghan, his inner circle, or his family felt like navigating a minefield. He describes moments of hesitation, moments of anxiety, and moments when the stakes felt almost unbearable. Could he really walk away? Could he really risk the relationships he cherished, the traditions he had grown up respecting, and the public goodwill he had spent a lifetime cultivating? The emotional turbulence of this period was intense. Harry speaks candidly about the fear that leaving could alienate him from his family, fracture bonds that had been in place since childhood, and create a public narrative of betrayal or abandonment. The very act of stepping outside the UK felt like an irreversible decision, a departure that would define his identity for years to come. He describes a sense of vertigo, excitement mingled with dread, hope tinged with guilt, and freedom shadowed by responsibility. And yet, alongside the fear was exhilaration. Harry was embracing autonomy in a way he had never experienced before. He had the chance to craft a life on his terms, to prioritize family over protocol, and to live with a sense of authenticity that had been elusive under the watchful eyes of the public and the palace. It was liberation, but liberation that came with profound complexity. Every new step required careful consideration of logistics, optics, and emotional consequences. Moving abroad wasn't just about changing locations. It was about negotiating identity, relationships, and future possibilities. Harry recalls specific challenges that compounded the difficulty of relocation. Security concerns were paramount, from private residences to travel logistics. Public perception was another critical factor. Any misstep could be sensationalized, criticized, or misunderstood. And the practicalities of life abroad, visas, finances, schools for children, medical care, added another layer of pressure. It wasn't simply a move. It was a carefully calculated strategy to ensure safety, stability, and the opportunity to thrive. Yet perhaps the most difficult part of leaving the UK was the emotional strain. Harry speaks of moments of solitude where he questioned his decision, where the distance from family created pangs of guilt, where public speculation intensified the weight of choice. Leaving meant losing immediacy. The casual interactions, the spontaneous conversations, the familial presence that had been part of his life since birth. And while technology allowed constant connection, it couldn't replace proximity, intimacy, or shared experience. The decision to leave also forced Harry and Meghan to redefine their relationship with the monarchy. Boundaries had to be established, expectations recalibrated, and roles renegotiated. What did it mean to be part of the royal family while living outside the country? How would they honor tradition while prioritizing personal well-being? These were questions that required not only careful reflection, but also negotiation, diplomacy, and courage. And all the while, the media scrutinized every statement, every move, every public appearance, magnifying minor details into headlines and controversies. Harry also reflects on the cultural shift. Living abroad meant adapting to new norms, expectations, and social landscapes. The contrast between the monarchy's structured environment and the relative fluidity of life abroad was stark. Harry recounts moments of wonder at the freedom, paired with moments of nostalgia for the familiarity of home. It wasn't just a geographical shift, it was a cultural and emotional recalibration, a reorientation of identity and purpose. Yet even as Harry embraced this new life, he remained aware of the distance it created. Family dynamics were strained, public opinion was unpredictable, and private relationships required constant attention. He speaks candidly about the loneliness that accompanied relocation, the sense of being between worlds, no longer fully in the UK, yet not entirely immersed in his new surroundings. It was a liminal space, emotionally charged, full of potential, yet fraught with uncertainty. And amid this tension, Harry's reflections reveal the interplay between personal choice and public consequence. Every decision to leave, every contract signed, every public statement made had ramifications far beyond his immediate life. He understood that independence came with visibility, responsibility, and scrutiny, that freedom was inseparable from accountability. He describes the challenge of balancing these forces. The desire for personal life versus the obligation to consider family and public impact, the need for privacy versus the inevitability of media coverage. Audience engagement becomes unavoidable here. How would you navigate such a decision? Could you leave everything familiar behind for the promise of autonomy, knowing the world would watch, judge, and speculate? Could you balance love, duty, and ambition under a microscope that never blinks? Harry's candid account allows viewers to reflect on these questions, to empathize with the emotional complexity, and to understand the stakes involved. In the midst of all this, there were moments of clarity and joy. Harry speaks of shared experiences with Meghan, building a home, exploring new communities, enjoying family moments away from public scrutiny. These glimpses of normalcy, of domestic happiness, contrasted sharply with the external pressures, creating a dynamic that was both liberating and challenging. He describes these moments as essential anchors, allowing him to reconcile the freedom he had sought with the responsibilities he carried. But even as the dust settled on the initial move, Harry realized that leaving the UK was only the beginning. It didn't resolve underlying tensions with family, media, or public perception. It introduced new challenges, logistical, emotional, and social, that required ongoing attention and negotiation. The very act of relocation had shifted the playing field, but it had not eliminated pressure, conflict, or expectation. In some ways, it intensified them, creating new avenues for scrutiny and public debate. And yet, through all the uncertainty, Harry learned resilience. He discovered that stepping into a new world, away from the familiar, allowed him to define himself more clearly. He could make decisions grounded in love, authenticity, and personal values, rather than being dictated solely by tradition or expectation. He could shape a narrative that reflected his reality, not just the world's perception of it. And in doing so, he gained not only freedom but a renewed sense of purpose. But Harry also knew that distance would not erase the past. The UK, the monarchy, the media, and even family expectations would continue to exert influence. Relationships would be tested, narratives contested, and private struggles exposed. The challenge was ongoing. To navigate life in two worlds, to maintain integrity, and to protect what mattered most while confronting the inevitability of public scrutiny. And in the next revelation, he realized that leaving was only the first step in a journey that would test every aspect of his identity and resilience. Even as he embraced independence, a new crisis loomed, a revelation that would challenge assumptions, test alliances, and force him to confront truths he had hoped to leave behind. And it was coming, faster, more unexpectedly, and more dramatically than anyone could have anticipated. What role does a partner truly play in shaping your life? Not just as a companion, not just as a lover, but as someone whose influence can ripple through every decision, every relationship, every outcome? For Prince Harry, Meghan Markle was not just a wife. She was a catalyst, a strategist, a confidant, and, at times, a force that moved him faster than he anticipated. But what exactly did Meghan do that changed the trajectory of their lives? And how did Harry navigate the fine line between love, loyalty, and autonomy? Harry begins by reflecting on the moment Meghan entered his life. The connection was instant, electric, and transformative. But along with the romance came intensity. Meghan was ambitious, determined, and focused on building a future that aligned with both of their values. She had a vision for their lives together, a life where freedom, security, and authenticity were non-negotiable. And while Harry was inspired by her vision, he also found himself confronting the pace and scale of change it demanded. He admits candidly that Meghan's influence accelerated decisions in ways he hadn't fully anticipated. Leaving the UK, stepping back from royal duties, signing media deals, these choices, monumental in their own right, were shaped and, at times, propelled by Meghan's determination. Harry describes moments where her drive and clarity created tension for him. Moments when he felt both empowered and unmoored. Moments when love and loyalty collided with hesitation and doubt. And yet, he never questions her intentions. Meghan, he insists, acted out of love, a desire for security, and a commitment to their family's well-being. But in the intensity of the whirlwind, Harry sometimes felt swept along, caught between the urgency of action and the need for reflection. He describes the emotional complexity of this dynamic. Admiration for her strength, respect for her intelligence, and love for her spirit, all intertwined with the anxiety of moving faster than he might have chosen on his own. Harry also speaks about the contradictions inherent in their partnership. Meghan encouraged him to assert independence, pursue opportunities, and protect their family. At the same time, her presence and influence created pressure to act decisively, sometimes without full pause. The tension was not born of malice or manipulation. It was born of love, ambition, and the shared understanding that they were stepping into uncharted territory. Yet, for Harry, this dynamic sometimes made him question whether he had fully owned each choice or whether momentum had carried him forward. One of the most poignant aspects of this chapter is Harry's reflection on trust. To follow Meghan's lead required deep faith, faith in her judgment, faith in her vision, and faith in their bond. Harry reveals moments when this trust was tested, disagreements over timing, strategy, or public messaging. Yet, even in moments of tension, he emphasizes the strength of their partnership, the mutual respect they maintained, and the shared goal of creating a life aligned with their values. The emotional stakes were enormous. Harry recalls moments of doubt and hesitation, tempered by moments of exhilaration and clarity. Every decision influenced not just their immediate circumstances, but their family, their public image, and the broader perception of the monarchy. Harry describes an almost constant balancing act, honoring his own instincts while trusting Meghan's perspective, pursuing independence while respecting tradition, asserting agency while maintaining partnership. The complexity of these dynamics is profound, and it underscores the intensity of their shared journey. Harry also delves into the personal dimensions of Meghan's role. She was a stabilizing presence in moments of chaos, a voice of reason when decisions loomed large, and a source of unwavering support amidst relentless public scrutiny. Yet, her influence was not just emotional, it was strategic. Meghan pushed for clarity, action, and momentum, challenging Harry to confront fears he might otherwise have avoided. Her guidance, encouragement, and sometimes gentle insistence played a central role in shaping the trajectory of their lives, accelerating choices that would ultimately define their path. But influence comes with complexity. Harry describes moments when he felt conflicted, when the speed of decisions clashed with his instincts, when loyalty to family weighed against loyalty to Meghan, when love demanded action faster than reflection would allow. He reflects on the paradox that love, while empowering, can also accelerate pressure, magnify consequences, and demand resilience. Navigating this tension required emotional agility, self-awareness, and, ultimately, courage. The public narrative, of course, added another layer. Every choice influenced by Meghan was scrutinized through the lens of media speculation and public perception. Harry recalls moments when headlines mischaracterized decisions, portrayed influence as manipulation, or questioned the dynamics of their partnership. The intensity of this external gaze created additional pressure, reinforcing the challenge of moving quickly while maintaining integrity, trust, and authenticity. Harry also reflects on the lessons he learned from this dynamic. Influence in a partnership, he realized, is not about control, It's about alignment, trust, and shared vision. It's about listening, negotiating, and sometimes acting before fear or hesitation can take hold. It's about recognizing the value of a partner's perspective, even when it accelerates choices beyond your comfort zone. And crucially, it's about maintaining agency, the ability to assert your voice, clarify your intentions, and reflect on outcomes, even in the midst of urgency. There's an emotional candor in Harry's reflections. He doesn't portray Meghan as a manipulator or himself as a passive participant. Instead, he presents a nuanced portrait of partnership under extraordinary circumstances, love and ambition intertwined, decisions accelerated by shared vision, trust tested by speed and pressure, and growth catalyzed by both support and challenge. It is a portrait of two people navigating unprecedented circumstances together, balancing personal desire with public obligation, and ultimately seeking a life that honors both. Harry also recounts moments when he questioned whether moving so quickly was wise. Decisions made in weeks or months might have taken years in another context. Opportunities for reflection, consultation, and deliberation were compressed by the momentum of their lives. Yet he emphasizes that these moments were rarely about hesitation or doubt alone. They were about weighing consequences, protecting family, and ensuring that every choice aligned with shared values. The emotional stakes were profound, and the weight of responsibility was palpable. Throughout this period, Harry describes a continual recalibration, balancing love, ambition, family, and personal well-being. Meghan's role was central in this recalibration, providing clarity, encouragement, and perspective. Her influence helped him navigate the whirlwind, accelerated some choices, and reinforced the need to act decisively in moments where delay might have had negative consequences. And yet, Harry emphasizes the importance of reflection, honesty, and agency in every decision, acknowledging that while influence shapes action, personal responsibility remains paramount. The tension between love, influence, and decision-making reaches a crescendo when Harry recounts moments of disagreement or uncertainty. He describes the intensity of debates, the fear of missteps, and the pressure of public scrutiny. Yet, even in these moments, he emphasizes the partnership's strength, mutual respect, shared goals, and unwavering support. It is in this crucible of pressure and decision-making that their relationship was tested, refined, and strengthened. And yet, as Harry reflects on Meghan's role, he reveals an insight that is both personal and universal. Influence in a relationship is never a zero-sum game. It is a dance of trust, communication, and alignment. It is about balancing urgency with reflection, passion with reason, and love with accountability. And while influence can accelerate choices beyond comfort, it can also create opportunities for growth, empowerment, and shared achievement that would not have been possible otherwise. But even as Harry praises Meghan's guidance, he hints at the inevitable tension it created, a tension that would surface in unexpected ways, challenge assumptions, and test the boundaries of their partnership. The next revelation, he suggests, will illuminate the moments when influence became intensity, when partnership intersected with pressure, and when love required decisions faster than either of them could fully anticipate. And it is coming. A turning point that will reshape everything they thought they knew about agency, choice, and loyalty. Family. It's supposed to be a source of comfort, support, and unconditional love. But for Prince Harry, family became a battlefield, a complex web of loyalty, expectation, and emotional strain that no one outside the palace walls could fully grasp. The fallout from leaving the UK and stepping back from royal duties rippled through every relationship, creating tension, misunderstandings, and conflicts that would haunt him for years. And at the center of it all was the question, how do you honor family when your own life demands independence? Harry begins by reflecting on the early stages of tension. The decision to step back from royal duties was monumental, not just for him and Meghan, but for the monarchy as a whole. It sent shockwaves through Buckingham Palace, sparked media speculation, and forced conversations that had previously been private into the public eye. Harry describes the emotional weight of these moments, the calls, the meetings, the attempts to explain, negotiate, and reassure. Every word mattered, every pause was analyzed, and every decision carried the potential for misinterpretation. He recalls the early phone calls with family members. Some supportive, some strained, some almost confrontational. The dialogue was charged with emotion, love intertwined with frustration, concern mixed with disappointment, loyalty clashing with independence. Harry admits that these conversations were among the most difficult of his life. He wanted to maintain harmony, yet he also had to assert his desire for autonomy. Balancing these forces was exhausting, emotionally and mentally. And it wasn't just about words. Actions mattered even more. Every choice he and Meghan made, moving abroad, signing media deals, controlling public appearances, was scrutinized by family members. Harry felt the weight of history pressing down, the expectations of tradition, and the implicit understanding that deviation could be seen as betrayal. He describes the subtle and overt pressures, expectations to attend certain events, maintain visibility, and uphold family image, all while trying to forge a new life. The fallout intensified as public speculation increased. Media outlets were quick to interpret familial tension as scandal, framing disagreements as drama and conflict. Harry recalls the emotional toll of reading headlines, seeing private struggles reflected in distorted narratives, and knowing that every interaction with family could become fodder for public consumption.